we welcome you, sir. I request all the participants to please maintain silence. We are about to start with our second technical session for the day. Now I request Advocate Mridang Vakil, Advocate Pritesh Gandhi, CA Rajendra Kabra, Bhavesh Govani, Advocate Dr. Kartikeya Shah, Advocate Kinjal Shah, Advocate Nitin Vadodria, Advocate Narendra Karkar, Advocate Rakesh Thakkar to please escort our eminent speaker, Senior Advocate V. Raghuraman sir, onto the stage. All the members in the auditorium are requested to please maintain the silence. I request all to please settle down as fast as possible. We are starting with our second technical session. We have with us Senior Advocate Raghuraman sir for this technical session. Here I take the privilege to introduce him. He is designated Senior Advocate, a Chartered Accountant, Cost Accountant and Company Secretary. I request all to please maintain silence. We have already started with the second technical session. Our eminent speaker is the designated Senior Advocate, a Chartered Accountant, Cost Accountant and Company Secretary with an illustrious academic record which includes first rank in BCom, 38th rank CA Inter, 24th rank CA Final, second rank ICWA Inter and 25th rank CWA Final. I request all for a big round of applause for such a academic performance. Specialized in taxation, FEMA and other allied laws, he has rich experience of more than 3 decades of appearing before the Supreme Court, High Court tribunals, addressed a large number of seminars and published several papers in national magazines on GST, excise, customs, service tax and FEMA. Being a member of the Indirect Tax Committee of the ICI New Delhi for the year 2014-15, he has authored books, The Landmark International VAT Decisions and Its Relevance to Indian GST, published by International Publishing House Wolters Kluwer, and GST and Indirect Taxes Demystified, published by Commercial Law Publishers. With great honor, here I welcome you, sir, in today's session. Now I request Co-Chairman Conference, Advocate Mridang Vakil, to please present a book to our speaker. Now I request Co-Chairman Conference, Advocate Dr. Kartikeya Shah, to please present memento, token of appreciation to him. A big round of applause for him. Now we are all set for the second technical session, and sir, the dais is all yours. We welcome you on the podium.
It's a very good morning to all of you, because we've listened to a brilliant speech by Mr. Vaitishwaran, who has exposed the... I have to thank the organizers for inviting me. The topic is current litigations in GST. Where do I start and where do I end? I don't know. I can only start by saying when you say current litigation, it is shocking. You can't touch it. First and foremost, if you look, what we never expected, but what has happened is because of this Section 73 limitation, you had a spate of show cause notices coming in September 2023. It has taken us now 5-6 months of intense effort in several high courts. Starting from October up to February, we have been terribly busy fighting all those show cause notices in various high courts. Now I really dread because your 74 show cause notices will probably come to end with this March. Now you are going to see another spate of show cause notices coming in March before 31st, which will be bigger because when the extended period is invoked, the figures are also larger. There is not one area where there is no litigation. Right from I think section 1 is the only one which, they have thought, let us not invoke. But there also, I found out, it extends to the whole of India, they say. Now they will start fighting. What is India? Because now we don't know, the map is also doubtful. We have one map in our minds, China has a different map in its mind. So each one is having doubt. If you take the subject matters which have been brought to the courts, it covers almost all the sections. Fortunately, I don't have to cover input tax credit because that will take 2 hours as it took for Vaiti also. First and foremost, which, is an interesting point of law where the Karnataka High Court thought it fit to appoint me as the amicus curiae, whether Rule 86A requires a prior hearing or not. If you look at the decisions of the Bombay High Court, they followed Maneka Gandhi's case and said, before you block the ITC, you don't need to give hearing. Post that, you can give a hearing. What is called post-decisional hearing, which was an invention, I would say, of Maneka Gandhi's case. You tell me one officer who will change his view post his decision. Please. Pre-decision itself, they don't change. So what happened? It was a very funny thing. So the Bombay High Court decision is there. That was followed by the single judge of the Karnataka High Court. Division bench, when the matter comes up for hearing, I don't know what's fortunate or unfortunate, I was in court for some other matter. Through VC, I was not even physically in court. And then the judge said, I have doubts on whether this decision is correct. And then he turns to the VC and says, will you assist the court? It was, of course, for us, it is our honor to assist the court. And then I had appeared and basically I have tried to convince the learned single judge that 86A, first of all, would be unconstitutional if you could block somebody's entitlement without even hearing him. 1. 2, these post-decisional hearings are a relic and much water has flown after that. Maneka Gandhi is in 78. After that, then I showed him the decisions in C.B. Gautam's case. I showed him the decision in Sahara India firm's case where they talk specifically about post and pre-decisional hearings. and said a pre-decisional hearing is a must. Two grounds which are important in 86A is, first, I should have reason to believe, not reason to suspect. Reason to believe, one. What is the difference? That means I should have some material with me. Material with me to show that the credit should be blocked. And that exercise should be done by the officer himself. He cannot rely on some other officer's report. That is reason to believe. I cannot say an officer in Goa suspects that this business is not there, so I will block your credit in Ahmedabad. Second, the officer in Goa will be inspecting the business today, but my credit was taken 3 years back. How can you say there is reason to believe? The hearings have been completed, the orders are expected any moment. So the point which I was trying to say is that 86A you should read in prior hearing before you block the credit. If that happens, it will be a boon for the industry. One of the hottest topics on which has been discussed in the last 3 weeks is the Constitution bench hearings on the royalty, which is happening now, whether royalty is a tax or is not a tax. Now, I am not going to go into that aspect at all. Royalty is a tax, not a tax is something which has to be decided by the Constitution bench now. But suffice it to say, that my understanding of what the Constitution says is this: powers of taxation will include any impost which is collected under a law. It is not just Income Tax Act or GST or etc. If you look at Article 366(28), which defines the powers of taxation, it includes any impost which is levied and collected under a legislation. When the state says, I have taxation powers, how is it exercised? It is exercised only through a statute. There is no other way it can be exercised. So the sovereign rights will have to be exercised in a particular manner. Please understand, the Constitution is the limitation on the rights. You don't require the Constitution to tax. I'll put it bluntly. When a state comes into being, taxation powers are inherent in the state. Constitution is a limitation on the taxation powers, if any. When you have list 1, list 2, it's a limitation indirectly on the one legislature's powers. Similarly, Article 265 is a limitation on the state's powers. Article 265 says you cannot collect the tax without authority of law. You cannot retain the tax without authority of law. So therefore, any statute which imposes, where there is an impost, is a tax. So taxation powers. It could be fee, it could be cess, you may call it in any name. But it's the powers of taxation. So my humble view is that royalty is nothing but a tax. You may call it profit share, you may call it anything, but it is an impost. It is different from royalty agreements between me and him. Because I can't pass a law. Please understand, I can't pass a law. It's only the states which can pass the law. And the state collects the tax. I have no responsibility to use that royalty for general good. I can use it for my family's good or just for my own good. But when the state collects it, it has a responsibility to use it for the public good, public purpose. So therefore, Any collection done by the state, backed by a statute, is a power of taxation. So therefore, the royalty which is collected, in my opinion, is a tax. But I am not on that now. I am on something else. Now let us assume for a moment's sake, Supreme Court holds that royalty is a tax. Then all this service tax and GST collections on this royalty goes, finished. Because you can't have tax on tax. Now let us assume that Supreme Court, however, says royalty is not a tax. What will be the implication? Then can you collect a GST on royalty? Can you collect a GST on all the licenses that you are letting out? The fundamental aspect which seems to have been missed with the government is this. GST is a tax on supply of goods or services, not a tax on supply of pre-supply contracts. It is not a tax on pre-supply contracts. It is a tax on supply of goods and services. Unless there is a chain which starts from the producer and ends with the consumer, in that chain, the transactions which come are liable for GST. What happens before that chain is not a subject matter of this tax at all. You may have fixed rate notifications saying licensing rights. Licensing is a regulatory function. It is not a service. I don't know from where this government gets this idea that licensing is a service. It is not a service. Why do I license somebody? Because I want to regulate. It's not a service, it is a regulation. And when I have regulatory proposals, there is one decision of the European Court of Justice, which is an Max case, where they say licensing of this, what do you call that, telecom waves, whatever it is, spectrum, like something like the spectrum. Licensing is not in the VAT chain. It's a pre-supply contract. So this is the line of arguments that we should now take. If the Supreme Court says GST, if the Supreme Court says royalty is not a tax. The second, what is the other litigations that are going? So I've made a list of, never-ending list is there, but I've made a short list of what is there in litigation. What is the position of this 142(1) capital A rule? You see, this is the funniest thing that happened. In the service tax era, you had what is called pre-consultation show cause notices. They used to have a pre-consultation with the department, which was only a dialogue to find out when you will pay the tax. Because no pre-consultation resulted in dropping of any show cause notice to the best of my limited knowledge. So once that was done, show cause notices would be issued. No, it was actually done at the directive of the High Courts, which says you should reduce litigation in tax. So 142(1)(a) said you shall issue a DRC 1A. You shall. In 2020, they changed it to may, because all High Court struck down all the show cause notices saying you have not issued 1A. They changed it to May. What they did not change was the provisions of section 73(5) of the Act. They never did that. They forgot about it. Somebody would have told them shall is becoming a nuisance. Change it to May. So they changed it to May in the rules. They have not seen the scheme of the Act. Scheme of the Act says that why are you issuing this 1A in the first place? If the assessee wants to opt for payment of tax so that he will avoid with interest so that he will avoid the penalty, he will do so. For that reason, 1A is issued. So therefore, even after the amendment, in my humble view, 1A has to still be issued, otherwise 73(5) will not come into operation. And if 73(5) does not come into operation, you cannot settle your matters if you want to settle it, I am saying, by paying the tax with interest to avoid penalty. So even after the amendment to 2020, it is my humble view that 1A is still mandatory. And if you say 1A is optional, I am finding now many show cause notices being issued directly without there being this 1A, DRC 1A issued, which in my opinion is wrong. It is mandatory for them to issue the DRC 1A. Try for a settlement with the assessee. It's a different thing that assessee may not want to settle. That's a different issue. It's a completely different issue. In fact, I found one decision of the Gujarat High Court in agro-metal vendibles, where they touch upon this very nicely. Justice Pardiwala, very good judgment, where he touches upon this aspect and talks about the interplay of 73 with 142, which should be followed. Issue number 3. Government contracts and introduction of GST. This is another thing which is across the country, where we have met with success in the Karnataka High Court. Now, government enters into contract with you, all inclusive. See, in government contracts, everything is inclusive. Only thing which are not included in the government contract are your father and mother. Everything else is included. Price is all inclusive, they will say. Inclusive of what, we don't know. No, they made this, let us assume, when GST came, price all inclusive contracts were being executed. All your works contract were taxed in the earlier regime at 4%, 5%, etc. Now it has become 12 or 18 as the case may be. So the obvious difficulty being faced by, the contractors today face the maximum difficulties. Difficulty number 1, getting contracts. Difficulty number 2, getting payments for the contracts. Difficulty number 3, GST. Now GST on contracts, which means a differential of 8 to 10%. How is this 8 to 10% to be? Who is going to pay this? File writ petitions. What is the ground we took? Point number 1, when you envisage, even if it's all inclusive, when you envisage the contract, you never envisage GST. You never envisage GST rates will go up. So you rely on section 64A of the Sale of Goods Act, the analogy there. 64A of the Sale of Goods Act says, if there is an increase in tax, the tax will have to be reimbursed, even though you have a contract. 1. 2, if you look at it, there were several governments which did not revise their rates. They have rates fixed for contracts. These rates for materials was not revised up to 2019-2020, which means the government contracted rates were talking of sales tax inclusions. They never thought of GST. And they revised it only in 2019-20. So we showed to the courts. Till 2019, the Karnataka government, for example, never even thought of revising the standard rates. It was all based on sales tax. And therefore the court said, yes, that amount of GST should be reimbursed. So it's a very useful, several decisions are there, mass constructions. Chandrasekhar Ayya's decision, where they specifically say on contracts where GST rates have been hiked, the differential will have to be made good to the contractors. Of course, the department will surely go to the Supreme Court on all these judgments. Every judgment will be appealed against. So all the advocates here can be sure of their present employment and even retirement employment. There's no, GST will take care of all of us. There's nothing to be afraid. In fact, you don't need to be worried about competition at all. If you're so worried. Me and Vaiti are never worried. But even those who are worried about competition don't need to worry, because GST will give you enough and more litigation. Enough and more. You'll have no dearth. It's becoming like a civil, it will give you better than civil matters. That much of dispute is there. One thing the next issue which I'm coming to is what is worrying me a lot. The taxation of developmental rights. You have a recent decision of the Telangana High Court which says taxation of developmental rights. Developmental right is a service. Developmental right is a service. That is in Pratibha Constructions case, a division bench. So the next stop is Supreme Court, if they take it up. Unfortunately, the Telangana High Court has not gone into even to see the General Clauses Act or the Transfer of Property Act. They have not even seen it. How developmental rights is defined in these legislations has not been seen. How developmental rights is nothing but immovable property has not been seen by this, unfortunately, by the division bench. So we need another set of decisions from high courts which may look into this aspect newly and see whether developmental rights in the first place can be brought to tax at all. You may have notifications putting it in reverse charge, this charge, that charge, anything. But notifications cannot make something taxable which is otherwise not taxable. You can't issue an exemption notification, withdraw it and make it taxable. No. That is not permissible mode or method of taxation. The same thing is happening in another issue. The compensation and solatium that you get on immovable property across the country, show cause notices have started. Somebody acquires the property for, eminent domain. They acquire the property. The government acquires private property for building railways. Gives you compensation under the Right to Fair Compensation Act. Gives you solatium. The moment you receive this, GST authorities will issue you notice, saying you have agreed to tolerate an act. The very fact that I am not tolerating only, I am getting all this. Who tolerates the act to give away his land? Nobody in India will do that. It's an act of non-tolerance. And this, fortunately, they issued a circular on 3rd August 2022, where they say, yes, many of these things are actually non-tolerance. They are not tolerating an act. But nevertheless, the GST authorities have issued notice across the country saying compensation which is received for immovable property acquisition will come to GST as agreeing to tolerate an act. Now, what is this agreeing to tolerate an act? First thing which most of us have probably not realized or argued in courts of law is Schedule 2 is merely a classification entry. Schedule 2 doesn't make anything as taxable on first principles. Please understand this. When they deleted section 7.1d, 7.1 clause D was deleted with retrospective effect from 1/7/2017. They replaced it with 7.1 capital A. In 7.1 capital A, they said if something is goods or services under 7.1, then it will be classified in the manner in Schedule 2. So if it is in Schedule 2, automatically it doesn't become supply. Schedule 2 says if it is supply, then it will be classified in this manner. So please understand, Schedule 2 is a classification entry. Agreeing to obligation, etc., first of all, there should be a service. If it is not a service, there is no question of bringing it to tax. If you sell an immovable property, there is no question of paying GST. That all of us know. How is compulsory acquisition different from sale? No difference. Only difference is in sale you can bargain. In compulsory acquisition, you cannot do it. Makes you worse off. But fact is there is a transfer of title in immovable property. So this is the next spate of show cause notices I have argued this matter as of last week in the Karnataka High Court. It is going to be posted again. It has been posted next week. We continue with the arguments. In case we succeed, it will be another major milestone in GST. Secondment contracts. This is another issue which has come out of the Northern Operating Caterers decision in service tax. Let us assume a foreign company deputes its employees to your Indian company. And they are employed here and they get their salary here, part of the salary outside, part of the salary here. Now, what the department wants you to do is to pay GST on the entire salary, both in India and outside India. Outside India on reverse charge basis. And they are relying on Northern India operators case for that, to say that these people are deputed. Since they are deputed and they come and occupy your company and give advice, effectively whatever is paid to them, the cost of that which is met by the foreign company, to that extent you have to pay reverse charge. We have been lucky, I would say, in convincing the present set of judges in our courts, wherein we have pointed out to section 7.2, read with schedule 3. Section 7.2 of the CGST Act specifically starts with a non obstante clause, if you see it carefully. Non obstante. That means to say 7.2 will override 7.1. And 7.2 says transactions in schedule 3 are outside the purview of supply. If they are not supply, there is no tax. Employment contracts. They just don't say employment contracts. They say in the course or relation to. The wordings used in schedule 3 is in the course of employment or in relation to employment. These are two important things which you should keep in mind. In the course means starting from when the person was employed up to the time he is terminated. In relation is even wider. Anything in relation to employment doesn't come within the clutches of GST. Supposing I give food to the employee, if I give food to the employee, it is in relation to employment. Why? Because the business believes that food has to be given to the employee to retain him. You cannot see it with the eyes of the taxman. Anything has to be seen with the eyes of the businessman. So what is in relation to employment is taken out of GST. So we were able to convince the high courts that secondment contracts are in relation to employment. If it is not a supply, there is no question of GST. It's at an interim stage. Stay has been granted on all these show cause notices. There were indiscriminate amount of show cause notices which was issued. And then board issues a beautiful circular. What does the circular say? Any number of show cause notices have been issued on this. Kindly examine the facts and issue show cause notice. This is the effect of the board circular. Even before the issue of the show cause notice, we knew that was the position. The circular need not have been issued at all to say, please examine and issue show cause notice. You should have done that in 73 itself. Unfortunately, you have not done it. So all those matters are now stayed and across several high courts and pending. This is all current litigations which I am touching on. Intermediary. Now this is one of the biggest areas of litigation. As per the GST department, our honorable respondents in most of the cases, everybody in India is an intermediary for a foreign company. Nobody does services or supplies goods on principal to principal basis. Everyone is an intermediary. Why? Because whatever commission he gets has to be taxed. If you put him as an intermediary, he will be subjected to tax. So we are having a very tough time dealing with this. The constitutional validity of this provision was challenged in the Bombay High Court. By a 2:1 majority, the Bombay High Court upheld the constitutional validity. But strangely, they passed 3 decisions, 3 separate decisions. One judge who said it is unconstitutional, another judge who said it is constitutional to tax intermediaries, third judge who said it is constitutional but it will be confined to the IGST Act because it is exports. 3 varying judgments. Pending now at the Supreme Court. Then what is the correct position, however? Please see where they have put this intermediary. Kindly see where they have inserted this. They have put it in 13(8) between bankers and others. They have put it in a section which pertains to B2C transactions. This is what I showed the Karnataka High Court. How can you club me, who is a B2B intermediary, with the B2C transaction? You are treating unequals equally. See, there are 2 principles in Article 14. Treating equals unequally, treating unequals equally. Both these are barred in Article 14. Both cannot be done. Mupil Nayar's case, you will find AR 1961, where the Supreme Court said, treating all the lands as the same. That means you are treating unequals equally, offends Article 14. That is Mupil Nayar's case. The same argument we have taken for the intermediaries. We will have to wait and see what will happen on this. I am sure this matters also will go to the Supreme Court without, it's already there in Supreme Court. Even if we succeed in the other high courts, it will certainly go to the Supreme Court on this. There is a set of matters which I have argued there is a lot of dichotomy of views across high courts. Universities which collect affiliation fee from colleges. Supposing a college is floated in the state of Gujarat, it has to be affiliated to the universities. University will collect an affiliation fee. Now, GST authorities, like service tax authorities, are the same fellows. They feel university is rendering a service to colleges. And therefore, the affiliation fees should suffer GST. Now, I do not know who renders services to whom nowadays. Reason is everybody is rendering service to everyone. One day, I will not name the court, in one court, one judge asked me, now say services includes everything, is it not? For a moment I was taken aback. How do I answer this? How will I answer? Services, everything is included. Everything means what? So I had to tell him, it's not like that. There is something called state list 2. List 2 is still intact. There is no change in list 2. GST does not include everything. There are things which are still left out of GST, and I had to show him patiently. And then he understood beautifully. Yes, oh yes. See, the impression we get is different. The problem with American jurisprudence is this, in importing it into India is this. In America, there is an overemphasis on rights. In India, we are attuned to duties. Agreeing to an obligation, that phrase itself is wrong. You have to take care of your parents. That's your obligation, whether you agree or not. So this dichotomy is always there. One is a right-driven society, this is a duty-driven society. Don't try to become like those people. It's not in your blood. It's not in your blood. It's not there. If you are asked to throw your sons or daughters out at the age of 16, go and study in some college or uni, you will not do it. It's not in your blood. But there, that is the norm. That is the standard. That is how life is run. You cannot, that law of rights, you cannot apply it here. Because here, if you apply, it will twist the law. Why am I saying it for universities? Universities are under a duty to run education. It's not their right or something. It's the state's duty to run education. And there is one thing which I have not understood. You please see the definition of business in 2(17). Is education there? Is education there in 2(17)? Please see it. Education is an occupation, says Supreme Court in TMA Pai's case. Occupation is not included in business definition. Vocation is only included, not occupation. Education is not seen as business in this country. It is seen as business everywhere else. You may laugh and say, oh, what about the schools? They are charging so much. What are you saying, sir? But concept of education, as far as up to universities are concerned, is that universities are set up under a legislation, an act of parliament or act of state. Their duty is to give affiliation. That is not service. When you do a statutory duty, it is not service. Please understand this. A statutory duty done under a statute can never be a service. Ahmedabad Industrial, what is that authority case? In the income tax, you had this case. What did the Supreme Court say? 3 bench. When you do a statutory act, it is not a fee for consideration. When you say consideration in Indian law, it means it is contractual. Unlike in UK law, UK VAT law has crossed that barrier. In Indian law, when you say consideration, it must be backed by a contract. If you don't have 2 persons who are willingly entering into a contract, there is no taxation in India. So if you have only a statutory body which imposes certain conditions, gives you license or gives you affiliations, these cannot be subjected to tax. I was able to convince the Karnataka High Court, which quashed the show cause notices. The Telangana High Court has taken a diametrically opposite view than the Karnataka High Court. Karnataka High Court says no GST, no service tax. Telangana High Court says there should be a GST. Madras High Court earlier decision said there will be no service tax. Now there is a change. The learned single judge in Madras High Court feels that there should be a tax because it is not in the notification. See, our problem today is we look at the notification and then we say, oh, you are exempt there. If you are not exempt, you are taxed. That's a wrong way of looking at it. Please see the decision, Justice Arjit Pasayat's decision, ACC's case. Exemption presupposes the levy. You can only exempt what is otherwise leviable. If it is not leviable, there cannot be an exemption. On education, in my humble view, education you can't bring to tax. If you have exempted educational colleges, that is your understanding of the law. Our understanding of the law, education is not business. If education is not business, supply of goods or services in the course of business only can be brought to tax. Educational institutions will be outside the purview of GST. On first principles, I don't require an exemption notification. So this is another line of case laws. In fact, there was one decision for supply to educational institutions from Gujarat High Court. Sahitya Mudranalaya, that decision of a very eminent judge, which also says educational institutions includes universities, because without them you can't run your education. Beautiful judgment of the Gujarat High Court. So we are hoping that when this goes to the Supreme Court, we will be in a position to do the needful. This proper officer, next. Who is this improper or proper officer, as the case may be? We are having a lot of issues with this. Exactly what the Canon India judgment said is what the department is not doing. What did the Canon India judgment say? When you say the proper officer, it means only one proper officer. And that is the officer who does assessment. Only he can do reassessment. Simple. Now, what is 7374? Is it assessment or reassessment? In my view, assessment is always done by the assessee. Under the present, it is called self-assessment because your assessment definition includes. So 73, 74 are reassessments. Reassessment by the proper officer. Now, who is this proper officer under 291? One who is by the board in the commissioner who is appointed as proper officer. Now, board issues a circular. X is proper officer. Commissioner, superintendent, somebody. In addition, they say, DGGA officials across the country can issue show cause notice. Audit officials across the country, they can also issue show cause notice. State, you have state GST laws where the commissioner can delegate his powers to others. Here again you find enforcement officers issuing show cause notice, audit officers issuing show cause notice, tax officers issuing show cause notice. So today it has become multiple the proper officer. Why is this happening? It's because the states want to tax, the center also wants to tax. Now when you look at it, the GST Council discusses this, comes to a conclusion. When we cross-empower officers, what is the decision they took? Decision number 1 they take is, we will split the assessees into center and state jurisdiction. Some will go to state, some will go to center. Very good. Now they discuss how do we cross-empower. When it comes to cross-empowerment, there is no agreement. Then the ministers tell the GST councils, Arey Baba, see, refunds are all being held up. So for refunds, you please do the needful. So they are cross-empowered for refunds. They are not cross-empowered for anything else. So there's a notification issued cross-empowering them for refunds. For all other things, nothing is done. Just leave it. Then they find, how do we do it now? We can't. Board issues circular. Interpreting section 6, they issue a circular saying, what do they say? It is not necessary to. So this is the new method of investing jurisdiction. If you don't agree at GST Council, tell the board to issue. In my view, the board circular is ultra vires the act. 1. Challenges there in the Karnataka High Court, proceedings are stayed. In my view, you can have only one proper officer, the proper officer, because the Supreme Court says if you have more than one the proper officer, there will be chaos in administration. This is the very words used by Supreme Court. It's not my word. The phrase chaos in administration. It's an Article 14 challenge. You see, what is that chaos? As an assessee, I do not know today who will issue me show cause notice. And from where I will get. So this proper officer conundrum should be sorted out by the Supreme Court once and for all. And I believe that the retrospective amendments which have been made and which have also been challenged in the Customs Act will not apply to service tax law or to the GST, because this is different, that is different. How much time I have? Please tell me if I am going across or anything. Please tell me. I have a lot of time? Yes. Controversy, next controversy. Because we have lots, we can keep on discussing, there is no problem. Even if I forget something, you prompt me, I will tell. Oh, I have still 1 hour. Yes. Absolute, fantastic it is. I will put your entire audience to sleep. What is the? Proper officer citation. Citation, Canon India, I think 276 ELT, is it? I am not very sure. Please, 376 ELT, I think. Just tell me. Canon India. CANON. You put a search. I think it is 376 ELT, if I am not mistaken. You can just check it out. It is Justice Bobde's judgment. Justice Bobde, B-O-B-D-E. Search in that, you will get it. Depositing cash in the cash ledger, will it be enough to save me interest liability? Next question. Let us assume I am filed the returns late, but I have sufficient balance, cash balance in my cash ledger. Not paid to government specifically. So as to say, I am saying, not paid to government when I say, I have not appropriated and put it there. Will it save me from interest liability? Will it not save me from interest liability? The dichotomy of views, the Jharkhand High Court and the Madras High Court taking different views. And I think the Madras High Court is right. Absolutely right. If I put an amount in the electronic, I'll give you this simple example. Let us not go into all the other details. Simple. If I put my amount into the electronic cash ledger, I can transfer it from a bank account to the cash ledger. Correct? I don't require anybody's permission, anything, I can put it into the cash ledger. If I want to retransfer it back to my bank account, is it possible? Then who is that money lying with? Now, how can you say it is not appropriated, it is not debited, it is not credited, it is not underlined? What is all this? I can't understand this line of thinking by the government. The electronic cash ledger is what you have kept. Your account of mine. Because I have my own electronic ledger in my computer. It is an electronic credit and cash ledger. Is your account of mine. How can you say that money has not been deposited with you? So in my view, when you deposit the cash into the electronic cash ledger, it's as good as having kept it with the government in safe trust. Because refund is not automatic. I have to apply for refund under section 54, 49, as the case may be. So interest liability, they should bring about specific amendments for all this. We should not have disputes and go to high courts on this. A specific amendment should be bought. If it is with the government, in whatever form it is, interest will stop. The clock of interest will stop. Unless you can prove that subsequently I have refunded and taken back the money, then okay, fine. Then it's okay. But the interest clock should stop. It cannot start and continue there. Next issue which I will deal with is cancellation of registration issues, which has become rampant. I see every day reported case laws from Delhi High Court is so high. Cancellation of registration case laws is the maximum in across the high courts. Now, whom does it benefit? I ask this question. Whom does it benefit? If I cancel the registration, whom does it benefit? The person who has not paid his taxes will be very happy if his registration is cancelled. Arey Baba, this is the end of it, let me go. No, not only you cancel the registration of the person, you also say this cancellation, as has been rightly pointed out by our friends here, is from retrospective effect. That is from 1/7/2017. If possible, they will start from 1/4/1961 when Income Tax Act was also, or even the previous act of 1922. But unfortunately, it's a GST law. They can only go from 1/7/2017. Now, if you cancel I have only this to say. If you cancel the man's registration with retrospective effect, you will also have to pay back the tax that he has paid with retrospective effect. Cancel is ITC, but payback is tax. You can't have tax being collected, ITC being cancelled, registration being cancelled, all with retrospective effect. And that is what the Delhi High Court also says. You want to cancel it, it has to be prospective. You can't do it retrospectively. And in fact, I think the TVL Suguna judgment of Madras High Court, which started this trend, was a very good decision. What the Madras High Court said is, if you cancel, you will go out of the GST chain. Why do you do it? Don't cancel his registration. Let him pay taxes with interest. Keep him in registration. You are doing the wrong thing. The Madras High Court castigated the officers. They said, why are you doing this? Why are you taking him out of GST? It is not in your interest. He wants to pay tax, he wants to pay it with interest, keep him registered. If you don't keep him registered, how will you keep track of him? Very good decision of the Madras High Court. In fact, across the country, they should stop this nonsense of cancellation registration with retrospective effect, because it not only disturbs that assessee, it disturbs the credit mechanism of all the assessees from whom they have bought. And that is not the intention of the law. The intention of the law is not to cancel all the registrations and cancel the credits. So this is one area where I think actively, if at all the board wants to issue a good circular, let them issue in this, to stop the cancellation of registrations. And I think the tax bodies should also represent to the government in some way. You should stop all this. This is what we call tax terrorism. This is called tax terrorism. The first terrorism was what you heard in the previous session, input tax credit. Because your attitude, let me tell you some facts and figures, at least one fact and figure, and I'll leave it to your imagination. You are collecting 1,60,000 crores per month, correct? On an average or more, depending on festive. Amazon, if Amazon season is there, then it will 1,80,000. Flipkart season, 1,85,000. That means you are collecting close to 20 lakh crores per annum, correct? Am I right? 20 lakh crores per annum is collected as GST. Enforcement of GST, how much do you collect per annum? How much? Does anybody have any figure? How much do you collect in enforcement? By enforcing? Huh? Government pocket. That pocket is different. It's a very good question. That pocket is completely different. That pocket leads to several pockets. We are not on that pocket. What pocket comes to the government consolidated fund? How much? Do you know it is 10,000 crores? As per government's own estimate. 10,000 crores as compared to 20 lakh crores. So what does that show? So many people are complying with the law by themselves. They don't require or they don't bother about your enforcement. They are complying as it is. If they are complying as it is, what is it that you should do for them? At least give them ITC, no? When somebody, even if your enemy comes to your house, you give him one chai. ITC is like chai. You give him at least that. 20 lakh crores versus 10,000 crores enforcement. Now don't tell, see, every time I find these revenue officials, GST officials yearly review, praising their officers for enforcing, the first person they should thank is the assessee. The second person they should thank is all the chartered accountants and advocates who comply with the GST law. Because they are the ones who are making these complaints. Easily, any of these people sitting here, all of us can tell, don't comply with the law. Assessee will be very happy to hear it. We don't do that. So the second person they should thank, and they should institute awards for us, and if possible exempt us from income tax. Because why should we do all this? Apart from the remuneration you get, is it not right that even the government of the day should think of incentivizing the professionals who are guiding the assessees to comply with the tax? Your tax was 90,000 crores sometime back per annum. Now it has gone to 1,60,000. You should be happy. Reason is assessees and tax chartered accountants and advocates and other professionals. This is how I see it. You may see it differently, but this is how I see it. I see that the professionals have done a fabulous job in making GST a success. What I feel. And that is the truth. You may have, in any tax you will have aberration. You will have people evading tax, avoiding taxes. That will always be there. You will have professionals who will also advise like that. That happens in every country. It is not country specific, please. Tax collection is not country specific. I can give you any instances of tax administrators worse than India. You may think Indian tax administrators are bad. No. You just see any of the leading case laws in the ECJ. You will find, this is just like our collectors only. There is no difference. I'll give you an example. One of the leading case which says consideration is a must. What was it? In UK. And you will find this here also. A musician playing on the road. Musician playing on the road. Some money is given to him. Some people in appreciation will give him. Some people will just walk off. The tax authority wanted to tax him under the VAT law. You are all laughing, no? But this is how even tax authorities are across the country. They are the same. They wanted to tax him, saying, is he not collecting an amount? Why is he not registered with me? There the European, all this matters go to the European Court of Justice. European Court of Justice said this. The person who plays this instrument cannot enforce collection. Unlike a contractual where you can enforce, it is enforceable. Quid pro quo. There is no quid pro quo there. Therefore, he cannot be subjected to VAT because there is no consideration flowing. Very famous dictum of the European Court of Justice, which will be followed in our country in due course of time. That if there is no consideration, there is no tax. And that consideration should be out of a contract. Unlike in UK law where you don't require a contract. Here you do require a contract for the purpose of your GST legislation. Is there anything else which I should speak on? Please tell me. Because I have exhausted my list. Anything else is there? You please tell me. Which one?
Schedule 1 in service tax 3 services and Schedule 1 in GST, same thing.
See, what is the specific question you have there? You have anything specific?
Yeah, 3 services in service tax and diluted in GST as a consideration.
See, the thing is this. Let me put it this way. If I am supplying to a related person, as you call it, distinct person, as you call it, It is like this. If I have decided to give it free to him, in fact, I am giving free services to all. There is no question of bringing it to tax, whether it is related or unrelated. If my contract is free supply, in my humble view, of course, there will be debates on this. My humble view, if I have decided to give something free to somebody, it is a gift. It is a gift.
Recently, I think if they don't, suppose the parent company don't charge the brand royalty,
No,
then
I will.
part of the zero value also that the GST will be levied because even the consideration was coming in form of the services of the royalty, even though you are not paying for it.
Please. We start with individual, we go to companies. When we talk of an individual gifting something to another man, he may be a related person, whatever it is, I am going to render this free. But let us assume you take any chartered accountant services. Your relative comes, you say, okay, I will give this free of cost to you. I can't charge you. See, that there's a difference. I can't charge you means there is no way a consideration flows. In my opinion, that part of the law has not been disturbed by GST. That's my humble view. You can say, no, that has been disturbed. Schedule 1 is only for that purpose. No. It is quite possible I am charging my client X amount and I charge my relative nothing because this is why I said, this is the difference between right and duty. What I am doing is a duty towards my extended family. In my opinion, you can't bring these things to tax at all. You cannot say comparable price you render to that man should be taxed in your hand at this man. You cannot also say you are trying to avoid tax. When I don't even get consideration, where's the question of avoiding tax? You just look at it. This is a stupid argument to take. When I am not even getting money, where is the question of avoiding tax? I don't get money for that. Now, if you say, oh, you had some quid pro quo in mind. You did this free service to your cousin because you were expecting something else from him somewhere. That is not for me to prove or disprove, it is for you to prove. So, in my humble view, such a transaction can never be brought to tax. But then you will say that is why the supply definition says without consideration, schedule 1. Without consideration. Now, I will finish. Without consideration means it should be in the course of business. These are the tests you should apply. Is it a supply? 1. Is it a supply of goods or services in the course of furtherance of business? 2. If it is not in the course of furtherance of business, there is no question of bringing it to tax. It is like keeping interest in bank deposits, you keep it. Is it in the course of furtherance of business? No. If I rent an immovable property, is it in the course of furtherance of my business? No. Even if it is commercial property. It is wrong to say it is in the course of furtherance of business. It is not in the course of furtherance of my business. It is the course of furtherance of his business. This is a fundamental error that we are making. We are saying residential property is exempt, commercial property should be taxed. No. Unless you can say that I have a business and in that business I am renting out. Like the example in Chennai properties case, the Supreme Court. If I have a business and in that business I am renting out, yes. If I don't have a business, my investment is that I have invested in a commercial space rental so that it protects me during retirement, let us say, apart from my That is not in the course of furtherance of business at all. There is no tax in GST on those. So therefore, you cannot say commercial property, no, why you are not paying tax? Even if the property is commercial, is it in the course of furtherance of your business has to be undertaken? So that is the principle on which I am saying if I decide not to charge because it is a cousin or it's the whatever you call related person, you can't bring me to tax. It's a very difficult proposition. I'm not saying that it is an easy proposition for you to, but this is the principle on which. I can't do business with my family. You see that there is a decision of the Supreme Court, Justice Patanjali Shastri's decision in 24 ITR, Kikabai Premchand and Company. You cannot make a profit with yourself. That's what Supreme Court says. You cannot make profit with. That is my humble view. As far as individuals are. Now you come to company. Company, you say, look here, my dear friend, head office renders certain things free of cost to the subsidiary. They don't charge, what is that? They don't charge a royalty, you are saying. They don't charge a royalty. Why they don't charge a royalty? There are some reasons, whatever be the reasons. Now, can you impute a royalty value and subject it to tax? Is the question based on the strength of Schedule 1. The easiest answer to that will be, since these are distinct persons, are they distinct persons? No. They are related persons. Since it is a transactions between related persons, automatically it attracts a tax. If no consideration is flowing, Schedule 1 imputes it as a supply. Imputes it as a supply of goods or services. Now I can have a line of business where I charge royalties to people. I can also, as my corporate policy, not even charge royalty to my subsidiaries. As a corporate policy, I need not charge. It's my corporate policy that I want my subsidiaries to be profitable, and so I don't charge. Can the GST law mandate me to charge? No. Can a tax be collected on it by mandating that it is a supply between one person to another? If there is a, let us say, worldwide policy by the holding company not to charge anything to all the subsidiaries, let us assume. Worldwide, I have taken a policy, I will not charge anything to subsidiary on account of this X activity. That means I have decided I don't want a consideration for this. Can I be subjected to tax? My answer is the same as I told you before. You cannot be subjected to tax on voluntarily giving up the power to collect a consideration. Even though the tax statute says it is rendered for no consideration, still I will bring you to tax. It will cover cases where, why have they brought this into tax avoidance measures? I am imputing a value and collecting a tax if I know this is a method by which you are pricing it in different ways. You are avoiding tax. You are pricing it in a different way. But where I have a worldwide policy not to tax any subsidy, not to charge royalty on any subsidiaries, it would mean that I am rendering it free of cost. I will not say there is no consideration. The consideration is zero. Consideration is 0. There is a consideration. That consideration is 0. Zero also is a value. It has a lot of value. If you put 0 between 11, what does it become? So that way. So in my view, if you can prove with records that something is done free, I think the service tax position should continue even in GST, because irrespective of who the person is, if I have decided to do something free, it is free. Next question, sir. Yes.
So when we talk about distinct persons, let us say a sole proprietor is having GST and in Gujarat as well as in Karnataka.
Yes.
Rule 28 mandates that the tax should be paid on the open market value. But the valuation provisions are governed by section 15. When we have a look at section 15 subsection 1, it says when price is the sole consideration and parties are not related, the transaction value would be accepted.
Yes. Then what
It
happens?
doesn't talk about distinct person. And how can Rule 28 talk about distinct persons as well? Isn't it ultra vires act?
Good question. See, you should read 15 fully also. There are several other subsections which says if I don't satisfy that, I go to the rules.
15 subsection 4 says if the price cannot be determined under 15.1,
Yes.
then I have to resort
Exactly. So if I can't determine the price under 15.1 because it is not, price is not the sole concern. Please understand. There is a judgment of Justice Rohinton Nariman. He deals with this concept in central excise law, where he says that should be read cumulatively. Just give me the act. If the act is there, please give it to me. Otherwise, don't bother. Don't worry. Same. Related person, don't worry. Don't bother, sir. Related person and price is the sole consideration. What the Supreme Court says in that judgment is that it should be satisfied, he should be related and price should be the sole consideration. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Isn't that the way this section 15 reads?
price should be the sole consideration and parties should not be related.
Look at this. And the recipient of the supply are not related, and price is the sole consideration. That means to say, if you are a related person and price is not the sole consideration,
You can go to valuation.
you can go to the rules. This is cumulative.
Yes.
So just being a related person,
Doesn't say.
Detergents India Limited. I was not getting the name of the case law. Detergents India Limited. Justice Rohinton Nariman's bench with Sikri, Justice Sikri. Beautiful interpretation placed. Related and price is the sole. So just being related is not enough. So the department will have to prove the person is related and price is not the sole consideration. So if you can show, this is nothing new. If you look at the customs valuation rules says, if the party can demonstrate that his price to an independent person and related person are more or less the same, this related person fiction cannot be invoked. You have to adopt that price. So therefore, this distinct person should cross this test first. It should meet both these conditions. And who is to prove this? Department. They will never be able to prove it.
Sole must mean that something must come from the other.
Yes. Sole consideration means what? There should be some quid pro quo for me to reduce price. So you should bring on record what was the quid pro quo. What did he do to me because of which I supplied this at lower price? That also should be proved. And let me tell you one more thing. Price can be the sole consideration even if my price is lower. Just because my price is lower than another man's price doesn't make price not the sole consideration. Please keep this in mind also. So just by saying you sold to the related person at 28 rupees a kg, you have sold to other unrelated person at 32 rupees a kg. Therefore, there is suppression. That is a wrong allegation. Subsidiary may buy 1000 kgs. Another man may buy only 100. So I may price this at 32 and that at 28. Nothing wrong. Price will still be the sole consideration. So in my view, this distinct, that is why they have whittled down the section 15 in rule 28 and other rules where they say, if credit is available, then whatever price he adopts, that's the end of it. They whittled it down because they know they cannot prove it. Until now, the judgments that have been coming, the onus of any undervaluation or overvaluation is cast on the department. And let me tell you, it's impossible. In business, what goes on in my mind cannot be proved by anyone. It's impossible for them to detect. Yes, sir. Yes. Please sit down, sir.
So, whether GST registration is mandatory for...
Please sit down. I have understood your question. Be relaxed. Because whatever answer I give, you know what answer I am going to give also. You all know very well. Charitable institutions, in my humble opinion, don't come within the purview of GST at all. They don't come within the purview of GST at all. You can rent out any commercial building, make lot of money out of it. But in my opinion, charitable institutions do not come within the clutches of GST. Because they do not, it's nothing is done in the course of furtherance of business. 2(17), you see clause 1, 2 and 3. You just see the first 3 clauses, 2(17). First clause will talk of manufacture, lease, etc., everything. Business. Second clause talks of incidental to that. Correct? So, issue is this, second and third clauses. First, I should have a business. And my supply should be in the course of furtherance of business. Anything incidental to that business can be taxed. Now, I don't satisfy that because first I have a charitable institution. My supply is in the course of charity. It is not in the course of business. I don't agree with that Gujarat High Court decision which was passed for this what is that? That sale of medicines without noticing the definition of business. The division bench created, in my opinion, my humble opinion, it's an error. My supply should be in the course of business. And anything incidental to business can be brought to tax. But business which is incidental to charity cannot be brought to tax. That is the true position. So whatever I do, my sale of books, you take that famous case of Sai Publication Fund, the famous case in the sales tax. What was it? It was a charitable institution which was selling books, propagating Sai Baba's. What did the Supreme Court say? This is an activity incidental to charity, not to business. You can't bring it to tax. So my humble opinion is charitable institutions are not in the tax net at all.
They are recovering charges for electricity higher than what they are paying and for other facilities.
Sir, it is like this.
In service tax, if the
are you taxable in the first place? Then we come to valuation. If you're taxable in the first place, then valuation you have to come to. This is why I say resident welfare associations also cannot be taxed. They are not in business. They are not in business. You can't bring them to tax. And in valuation, please understand this. Not everything can be brought to tax. What is incidental to supply only can be brought to tax. There are two judgments of the Supreme Court, please read it, in the context of Excise Act. Indian Oxygen's case, 36 ELT 723 and page 730. Two decisions are there on the same volume of Excise Law Times. You will find 36 volume of ELT, page 723 and page 730. Two decisions are there where the Supreme Court says not everything related can be taxed as manufacturing tax. If I recover, say, freight charges and make profit on freight, that is not a manufacturing tax. That is profit. That you charge me, take me to income tax, that's a different issue. So profit on electricity charges is only income tax subject. Nothing to do with GST in my humble opinion. So somebody else stood up there. Please. ITC, Mr. Vaiti should answer. I will take his permission and answer your. Liquidation. You have paid him the money?
Yes, with tax.
With tax. That's all over. Over. Sir, please sit down. See, government's non-recovery of tax. Please sit down, sir. Please don't. Government's non-recovery of tax from the supplier from whom it should collect. Because they have sufficient mechanisms, 73, 74, 79, everything they have. They can't cast that obligation onto you. They can't do double recovery. See, the 16.2 CAA, all this has to be struck down not only on that count, as also to be struck down on this count, that you don't have a mechanism to return the tax back to the person who has borne the incidence. I deny you ITC, then tomorrow some range somewhere will recover tax from him. Where is the mechanism to ensure that your credit is restored? Nothing is there. So 16.2A, 16.2C, whatever CAA, all has to be struck down. Because it is impossible for them to implement it. So in my opinion, you are entitled to your ITC. You please file a case on this if they deny you the ITC. Yes, sir. One 194I for this paying you as compensation.
Yes. In
Loss of whatever your revenue earning capacity. If I do business, I have GST. If I don't do business also, I have GST. Like Bhagavad Gita, if I do Karma Yoga, GST. If I am Sannyas Yoga, that also GST. in my view, you please go to the one of the most famous cases in the European Court of Justice, Jaggar and Mohar's case. Note it, Jugrenmohr, Jaggar and Mohar's case. What was this case? And batch of cases. What was this case? These cases. In Netherlands and other European countries, there was an excess production of potatoes and milk by the farmers. Excess production. Because of which prices came down so badly that they had to stop production invariably, but they were producing. How can you stop milk from being produced? So government said if prices are so low, the farmers suffering, Government said, okay, don't produce so much. So farmers said, if we don't produce, we lose some amount. No? So the government said, we'll compensate you for non-supply. Note it. We'll compensate you for non-supply. I told you tax authorities across the world are the same. There is one clause in the UK VAT Act, the directives, from which we have borrowed. Please understand, the UK law of VAT was first introduced in 1967. And the first directive on VAT came in 1970, 50 years before you even thought of it. And today the government advocates in India go and say, you should not follow the UK VAT or the decisions. They are not binding on India, but you are a beggar. You went and borrowed that law from UK. You borrowed that law from Australia. You borrowed the law from Canada. There also the same wording is there. To tolerate an act. To tolerate an act. Same wordings. So the tax authorities there said to tolerate an act, so they are tolerating. So you have to tax them. European Court of Justice says VAT is on positive. If you don't add value, there is no tax. If you add value, there is tax. If you don't add value, there is no tax. So in cases where you can't show a value is added in the chain, tax cannot be levied. This will cover your case. I am not doing business and still you want to tax me. It's like taxing a retired man, saying, who asked you to retire? This will be next time. I won't be surprised if the retired people in the country get a tax notice saying, you are tolerating retirement. And you are not working. Therefore, you pay GST on whatever your retirement funds are because you are tolerating the act of retirement.
Like the minimum balance in bank.
Minimum balance in bank, same thing. You don't keep 5,000 my funds. I can't decide how much to keep with the bank. And I would say one more thing. All Gujarat Federation of Tax Consultants should ask, in addition to what, calling me there is a disadvantage. I will tell you what you should do. And you will not want to do it also. You should ask that all assessees who deduct and pay tax at source should be compensated for their work. Because you penalize them for all this tedious business. Interest is charged, he is assessee in default. Why should I collect tax for the government? Is it not the duty of the government to collect tax for itself? So there should be compensation to us. Then that will come to GST, they will say. Yes, sir. Any further? I have some more time. I can ask. Finish some more questions, please. Yes. You see, sir, this you cannot even tax the doctors in the first place. But you want to tax donation to doctors or whatever it is, sir, under 7(1)AA, which they have introduced. Please understand, if this is donation, is it donation, sir? Donation means there is no quid pro quo. Donation means I don't expect the association to do anything for me. You take care of the doctors, that's all I am saying. So donations, in my humble view, cannot be bought to tax, because it is not a supply for consideration. First principles. It is not a supply for consideration. If it is a supply for consideration only, then there can be tax. If I voluntarily give you donation, how can there be a tax on it? Yes, sir.
Last two questions of the session.
Generally, in today, a lot of notices are received from the department for paying the tax and interest or ab initio cancel, issue or cancel either they are purchasing.
Cancellation of?
Cancel either purchase into you pay the tax.
Retrospective tax.
Of registration, you are saying.
Our client has sufficient proof of getting the delivery of food like transport.
You see, the Calcutta High Court has also dealt with it. Justice Chennai High Court is dealt. Calcutta High Court also has said you can't recover tax unless you do an inquiry. See, in any of these cases, the department will have to compulsorily do an inquiry and say that tax has been paid or not paid before they issue these cancellation notices. Otherwise, you go directly to the High Court, you will get relief.
Our client have paid the tax with the amount, value of food with tax to the our vendor.
Correct, that's what I am saying.
If even then government cannot recover from the vendor, our
Yes.
the Kolkata High Court to say that we want you to recover from the vendor. Then what will be our position?
So you challenge the show cause notices. Please challenge them. DRC already issued. Please go to this High Court is there, no? Go there. You have a High Court of Gujarat which will do the needful for you. They have done such a wonderful work in GST, you know. I can tell you, the best of the decisions have come from Gujarat High Court in those days.
Last question of the session.
Transfer of? This is a vexed question. In my view, paragraph 88 of VKC footsteps will cover it. VKC footsteps, they discussed about refund, this, that, everything. This is what I have shown to the Karnataka High Court also, just last week. Paragraph 88 of VKC footsteps will say, stamp duty transactions cannot be bought to GST. So in all these GIDC leasehold, there are two components generally as I have understood. One is the what they call the the transfer of leasehold rights. Another is the rental of that, a small rental which they collect. Now transfer of this leasehold rights is almost like a sale, and they register it and you pay stamp duty. So in my view, it cannot be taxed.
Can all local policy makers to bring non-GST transactions such as stamp duty?
Yes. Stamp duty transactions are outside the GST fold. That's what the Supreme Court says. I am not saying. The Supreme Court says.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much.
I am immensely ovation for the sir. I am immensely thankful to Raghuraman sir for his efforts for the topic current litigation in GST. His ideas and elegance of explanation on topic is highly commendable. Each professional sitting here can very well relate with the case studies and the analogies shared by you, sir. Sir, definitely you have cleared very well all the points, enhances our understanding for the provisions and the case studies. And it's a very informative session with a tint of humor added by you, kept us engaged in the whole session. Thank you so much. I also recognize the presence of our past chairman of the branch of ICI, CA Bhishan Shah, sir. Welcome you. Now I request our eminent speaker to please felicitate our committee members for their efforts. I invite Advocate Dr. Kartikeya Shah to please raise for the memento. Thank you. Followed by Advocate Mridang Vakil. Advocate Pritesh Gandhi ji. CA, followed by CA Rajendra Kabra. Bhavesh Govani. I request Advocate Kinjal Shah to please come forward for the memento. Followed by Advocate Nitin Vadodria. I request Advocate Narendra Karkar sir to please come forward for the memento. Here I request Advocate Rakesh Thakkar to please come for the token of appreciation. Thank you all. I request all the dignitaries on the dais and the committee members to please come forward for the group photograph. So, crossed 100 registrations for the next conference. So I request you to please register yourself for the Tax Conclave 2025. Bhagavad Gita will be gifted as a token of gratitude for the members who are registering today for the Tax Conclave 2025. Thank you. We'll assemble at sharp 2:30 p.m. for the next session.